The steady beep of the heart monitor filled the small hospital room, a cruel reminder of time slipping away. Olivia sat by her daughter Emma's bedside, her fingers wrapped tightly around her tiny, limp hand. The little girl's skin was pale, clammy with fever, and her breaths came slow and shallow, barely enough to keep her alive. Every faint rise and fall of Emma's chest sent a pang of helplessness through Olivia's heart. Across from her, Daniel sat in a hard plastic chair, his head bowed, shoulders slumped in defeat. His knuckles were white as he gripped the armrests, fighting to hold back tears. They had both been here for days, watching their daughter deteriorate, praying for some kind of miracle. But now, even the doctors had given up hope. "I'm sorry," the doctor had said earlier, shaking his head. "There's nothing more we can do. It's only a matter of time." The words had shattered Olivia. She had begged for something. Anything. To save Emma, but the doctors had none left to give. Daniel suddenly stood, his voice thick with sorrow. "I'm going to talk to the doctors again. There must be something. Some clinical trial. Some experimental treatment they haven't tried yet." Olivia nodded numbly, knowing it was useless. They'd explored every option, chased every lead, but nothing had worked. Her heart twisted as Daniel left the room, the door closing softly behind him. It was then, in the quiet, that Olivia first heard it, a soft tapping at the window. She froze, her breath catching in her throat. Slowly, she turned toward the source of the sound. At first, she thought it was a trick of the light, a shadow cast by the trees outside. But then she saw the figure, a woman, standing just outside the hospital window. The woman's form was dark, her face obscured by the hood of a heavy, tattered cloak. She stood still, her long, bony fingers tapping rhythmically against the glass. Olivia's heart pounded in her chest, a chill creeping up her spine. The woman didn't move, didn't blink, just stared at her with an unsettling stillness. For a moment, Olivia thought she must be hallucinating, her exhaustion warping her senses. But the woman's presence was too real, too tangible. She wasn't part of the shadows. She was there. Summoning every ounce of courage she had left, Olivia rose from her chair and approached the window. She hesitated before cracking it open, just enough to hear the woman's voice if she spoke. The woman's voice was a rasping whisper, dry and cold as dead leaves rustling in the wind. "You seek a way to save your child." Olivia blinked, startled. She hadn't said a word, but the woman knew the anguish in her heart, the desperation clawing at her soul. I do," Olivia whispered, her voice trembling. "But there's nothing left. The doctors can't help her." The woman tilted her head slightly, her hood shifting just enough for Olivia to see the faintest glint of pale skin beneath the shadow. "Doctors cannot heal what is beyond life's reach," the woman said softly. "But there are other ways. There is a way to save your daughter." Olivia's heart skipped a beat. She remembered the old stories she'd overheard as a child, the whispered rumors about a witch who lived deep in the briar wood, a woman with the power to grant impossible desires. The stories had been dismissed as old wives' tales, the kind of thing people told to scare children or explain strange occurrences in the village. She'd never believed them, not until now. Olivia swallowed hard, a glimmer of hope fighting through the fear. How? How can I save her? The woman's fingers rested lightly against the glass, her nails clicking softly as they drummed. There is always a price for life. A life that is lost can be restored, but something must be given in return. Olivia felt her stomach twist with dread. What price? The woman's lips curled into a small, knowing smile, though her eyes remained shadowed. The price is fair? A life for a life. But beware, the trade is not always as it seems. Consider carefully. What you give and what you take may not be so easily understood. Olivia's mind raced. A life for a life. Was she expected to sacrifice her own life for Emma's? She didn't care. If that was the price, she would pay it. She would do anything to save her daughter. "I'll do it," Olivia whispered, her voice firm despite the fear gnawing at her. "Just save her." The woman's hand extended through the small crack in the window, cold and pale, her fingers brushing against Olivia's trembling hand. "So be it," the woman rasped. The pact is made. A sharp, icy sensation shot through Olivia's fingers, up her arm, freezing her blood. Her vision blurred for a moment, and then the woman was gone. The window was closed, the room silent. Olivia stood frozen in place, her heart hammering in her chest. Had she imagined it? Had she really just struck a deal with a witch? Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a weak cough from behind her. Emma. She turned, her breath catching in her throat as she rushed to her daughter's bedside. Emma's eyes were open, her skin warm and flushed with color. The fever had broken. Her breathing had steadied. "Mommy?" Emma's voice was soft but clear, her tiny hand reaching out toward her mother. Tears spilled from Olivia's eyes as she gathered her daughter into her arms, sobbing with relief. "You're okay," she whispered, kissing Emma's forehead. "You're okay?" Daniel burst into the room, his face pale with shock. "Olivia, how is this possible?" "I don't know," Olivia lied, her heart pounding. She didn't want to tell him about the witch. Not yet. Not until she knew what price would be exacted. But for now, Emma was safe, and that was all that mattered. In the days that followed, Emma made a miraculous recovery. The doctors were baffled, calling it a medical mystery. Daniel, too, was overjoyed, though he couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Olivia, however, couldn't forget the witch's words. A life for a life. The phrase haunted her. She had thought the meaning clear, that she would have to sacrifice something for Emma to live. But she was still alive. She had not died. And yet, a nagging sense of unease lingered in the back of her mind. Then, the shadows came. It started with fleeting glimpses, dark shapes at the edge of her vision, moving just beyond the reach of light. Olivia told herself it was just exhaustion, that the stress of the past weeks was catching up to her. But the shadows grew bolder, and at night, she could hear them. Soft whispers from the corners of the room, voices that seemed to be speaking her name. Sometimes, when Olivia turned quickly enough, she thought she caught a glimpse of figures standing just inside the doorway. Flickering outlines, human-shaped but wrong. Too tall and too thin, their limbs stretching and curling at unnatural angles. But every time she blinked, they were gone. One evening, as she sat in the living room watching Emma play with her toys, Daniel stood by the window, staring out into the darkened yard. "Something's not right," he muttered, his brow furrowed. Olivia's stomach twisted. "What do you mean?" Daniel turned to her, his face pale. "I've been having strange dreams. Nightmares, really. And I keep feeling like I'm being watched." Olivia's heart raced. She hadn't told him about the shadows, hadn't wanted to scare him. But now she realized the witch's price might be coming due. That night, as they lay in bed, the whispers grew louder, and the shadows pressed closer. The air in the room grew heavy, thick with an unnatural stillness. Olivia sat up, her chest tight with dread. Something was coming. She could feel it, like the weight of a storm pressing down on her skin. Daniel stirred beside her, his eyes fluttering open. "Liv? What's going on?" Before she could answer, the shadows surged forward, black tendrils creeping along the walls, pulling themselves from the darkest corners of the room. They moved with purpose, coiling and twisting like living things, suffocating the light as they wrapped around Daniel. "No." Olivia screamed, reaching out to grab him, but her hands passed through the shadows as if they were smoke. Daniel gasped, his body convulsing as the shadows wrapped tighter around him, pulling him into their cold, suffocating embrace. His eyes widened in terror, his hand outstretched toward Olivia, fingers grasping for hers. "Olivia." Daniel's voice was strangled, barely a whisper as the shadows swallowed him, dragging him deeper into their darkness. His skin turned ashen, his lips blue, the life was drained from him. And then, in a moment of sickening clarity, the riddle became clear. The price is fair. A life for a life. Not just any life. Daniel's life. She had misunderstood the witch's words. The deal hadn't been her life for Emma's. It had been Daniel's. He had been the one to pay the price. Before she could scream, the shadows swallowed him whole, leaving only cold, empty darkness behind. And then, in the stillness, the witch's voice echoed in her mind, soft and cruel. "The trade is not always as it seems." Olivia fell to the floor, her body shaking with sobs, her mind reeling in horror. She had saved Emma, but at what cost? The shadow of her decision loomed over her, dark and suffocating. As the full weight of the bargain she had struck settled into her bones, the price had been paid, and now she was left alone, haunted by the knowledge that she had sacrificed the life of the man she loved.